I'd like to call to order this committee of the whole meeting of the town of Saugeen Shores and extend a welcome to everyone in the chambers this evening. And the first order of business is a declaration of pecuniary interest, and I'll remind every member of their responsibility to do so, and you can do so now or when it arises on the agenda. Councillor Matheson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to declare a pecuniary interest at 5.3.2 as the originator of the request.
Okay, so noted. None other than the next item on the agenda is additions, deletions, or amendments to the agenda, and we have nothing under that this evening. We have no delegations, so I'll move right down to the first staff report. It's a general government staff report on the 2015 year-end surplus, and our treasurer, Sue Dent, will present.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report summarizes the financial results for the year ended December 31st, 2015. While staff is confident that all transactions have been accounted for at this time, the financial audit is currently underway, and there is a possibility that additional adjustments may be required as a result of this review. Final sign-off of the annual financial statements is anticipated to be received by the end of May. In October of 2015, we presented a report summarizing the results of operations and preliminary capital spending for the first 9 months. At that time, we were anticipating a small surplus. Our actual estimated operating surplus at this point is $99,162.98. In addition, we received $219,287.17 in supplemental taxation revenue, and there was a very modest capital surplus of $2,753, totaling a total surplus of $321,203.15. While the goal is generally to have the balance of the tax stabilization reserve equal to 2% of tax revenue, this year staff is recommending that transfer also include the amounts that we have budgeted in the 2016 budget to transfer from tax stabilization, specifically an additional $192,000. There's several appendixes attached to the report. Appendix A summarizes operating and capital transfers to and from reserve as compared to budget. Only those that were either unbudgeted or vary significantly from the 2015 budgeted amounts are included in this list. Appendix B details the overall surplus or deficit for each service area with major drivers summarized on the second page. Appendix C provides the status of the 2015 capital projects at the end of December. Appendix D is a complete list of all the reserve funds and all of the 2015 transactions that have been processed. And Appendix E is a statement of the Treasurer regarding the development charges collected and spent during 2015. As was stated earlier, the combined surplus for operating and capital activities is estimated to be just over $321,000.
Thank you, Sue. Then the recommendation is that the transfer to or from reserves for the specific purposes outlined in the attached table be approved for the 2015 year end, and that the Treasurer's statement on development charges reserve activity be received. Questions, comments? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. The next item on the agenda is a staff report, and it has to do with the declaration of surplus lands on Deer Run Court, and our clerk, Linda White, will present.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The town owns a vacant parcel of land approximately 0.28 hectares in size, which is 22.9 meters in width and 60 meters in depth, at the intersection of the Shore Road and Deer Run Court. The property is a treed lot and zone plan development. The lot is serviced with municipal water and sewer. Municipal staff have reviewed future requirements of the municipality and are of the opinion that this property can be declared surplus to the municipality's needs and sold as a residential lot. However, since the property is zone plan development, staff is recommending that the property be rezoned residential prior to selling the land. In order to rezone the property, the town is required to submit a zoning amending application to the County of Bruce. The zoning application must be supported by a Natural Heritage Environmental Impact Study, referred to as an EIS. The EIS reviews the natural characteristics of the area, including but not limited to the vegetation, birding, amphibians, and wildlife habitat. AWS Environmental Consulting Incorporated of Shallow Lake is a local company that is familiar with this area, as they have completed a number of environmental impact studies north of the river. AWS has provided a work plan to complete the EIS over the spring and summer seasons at an estimated cost of $5,000. This report recommends declaring the land surplus to the municipality's needs and undertaking the necessary zoning amendment. Upon successful completion of the zoning amendment in the fall of 2016, the town will be in a position to sell the subject land. A report will be presented at a future meeting recommending the method of selling the land and seeking council's direction regarding the sale price. The planning application is estimated at $1,190 and the EIS is $5,000. And this cost that will be incurred to rezone the property will be funded from the sale of surplus lands.
Thank you, Linda. Then the recommendation is that council declares the property described as Town Plot Lot 21 South Huron surplus to the municipality's needs. That council directs staff to submit an application to the County of Bruce to rezone the subject lands. And further, council directs staff to retain the services of AWS Environmental Consulting Incorporated to complete the Natural Heritage Environment Impact Study on the subject lands. Questions, comments? Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to, I'm not too sure who, but how did we come to have this land on the municipal land inventory list in the first place? Was this parkland dedication, or did it come into the list in a different direction, from a different direction?
Our records do not indicate that it was parkland, but the exact being of it, I don't have the history to it.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a correction. You probably already noted it on the total cost. I think there's an extra 1 in there. Thanks.
Councillor Mike Myatt.
Mr. Mayor, I just had the same question as our Vice Deputy Mayor, and that was about whether or not this land came via parkland dedication or not. I'm just wondering if we could find that out, and I'm supporting the motion tonight, but I'm just wondering about the proceeds, if we can make a determination, firm determination that definitely was not parkland dedication. I think if it was, my mind it should go back into parkland reserve, but I'm just wondering if we could hear back from staff, Mr. Mayor, at some point, if that is a fact or not.
I think we can find that, yeah. Any further questions or comments? All in favor of the recommendation? Opposed, if any? That's carried. The next item on the agenda is an Environmental Services and Transportation Staff Report, and it has to do with the renewal of an agreement with the Southampton Snowmobile Club. And Director of Community Services, Jane Jagalewski. Oh, sorry. Len, sorry. That's what that was it?
Thank you, Mayor Smith. The Southampton Snowmobile Club currently utilizes municipal land in several areas throughout the municipality during the winter months for recreational snowmobile trails. This has been the practice for some time and has done well with little disturbance or complaints from residents. The development of the subdivision on Brentwood Drive in Port Elgin brought the existing trail into close proximity with the newly constructed residential area. The Snowmobile Club recognizes this is not an ideal situation and approached the town regarding an alternate route. The alternate route passes through the municipal gravel pit on Lennon Street and connects to Chapel Side Road. The Ministry of Natural Resources was contacted regarding this proposal and only required fencing to be erected to delineate the trail outside. Sorry about that. Outside the limits of the pit area. With the new trail location passing through the gravel pit, staff felt necessary and prudent to complete an agreement with the Snowmobile Club that sets out and describes responsibilities for all the trail portions that currently utilize municipal lands. As part of the agreement, the Southampton Snowmobile Club will be required to submit proof of insurance annually. The insurance will have the town of Saugeen Shores listed as an additional insured and have liability coverage of $15 million. The agreement is for a 5-year term and can be canceled at any time with 2 weeks' notice.
Thanks, Len. Then the recommendation is that council considers passing a bylaw to enter into a 5-year agreement with the Southampton Snowmobile Club for the continued use of various portions of municipal lands as described in Schedule A of the agreement for the purposes of a recreational snowmobile trail. Questions or comments? I'll start down here. Councillor Dave Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, Len, I went through the agreement and I can't see specifically where it answers my question. My question is in regards to, does this agreement give the Southampton Snowmobile Club exclusive rights to use those lands during the said period of time, being the winter, obviously, and make determination on whether or not other user groups would have access to those lands? Do they have sole propriety to determine which recreational uses are and are not allowed on that piece of property?
No, they do not.
They do not. So this differs then slightly from the agreement that we have with the Saugeen Rail Trail Association, whereby that agreement gives them the sole right to determine propriety over who can and cannot use that property.
That is correct.
Okay.
The Southampton Rail Trail Agreement is through Community Services Department, and the Rail Trail Agreement acknowledges the maintenance of that particular trail that we have with them. So that's the difference between it.
Recognize that the Rail Trail Association does the maintenance on the trail?
The Southampton Rail Trail, or the Rail Trail, it does, yes.
Okay. Well, I'm pretty sure the Snowmobile Club is doing the maintenance on this trail also.
We negotiate also with the Rail Trail and who's able to use the Rail Trail. As you may recall, there was some time ago when we renegotiated that, as there was some questions regarding e-bikes as an example, so we negotiated that with them. So it is a different agreement, and I certainly would be happy to forward you the agreement so you can compare the two.
I think we had agreement. We had that agreement come through our while ago. And in fact, I'm quite glad that the answer was no to this question, because I don't think that any group that we enter into an agreement with over the use of any municipal-owned facility property should have the right to determine who can and cannot use them. Groups, I think that right should be, like any other right with property or facilities owned by the town, should be retained by the council and the elected people who are here to make that. That's all I have to say about that.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you. I just have a comment and then two questions about clarification. The liability coverage for $15 million. I know we've been creeping up from 2 to 5. Is the 15 accurate, or is that a little typo? Or does it have something to do with the nature of the business?
Okay, I think Len can speak to it.
That's from their end. They came up with $15 million.
Okay, that's good.
So they offered it, so we put it in the agreement.
Okay. I also noticed that it's the cancellation is 2 weeks. Often we have 60 days. Is that did they ask for 2 weeks too?
That's a standard that was in the previous agreement, and we didn't make it any longer or any shorter. Just left it the way it was.
Okay. Then my third comment is really just a comment. All of this activity, of course, is great. I'm just curious, do we ever work with the Snowmobile Club to discuss the routes that lead into service areas? For example, in Southampton, used to come down past the fire hall because the gas station was downtown. Well, now, of course, the gas station has moved slightly. Do we ever work with them to think about what's the best way for them to get off the trails to the service areas, in particular gas? The reason why I ask that is that you've got a sport or a recreational activity that perhaps generates some revenue and also a lot of enjoyment for a number of people, but often the routes into the service areas are some of the best plowed in town, which is a good thing. But I'm just curious, do we ever have those kinds of conversations with them?
No, we haven't as of yet that I'm aware of. But being relatively new, maybe we have.
Any further questions? All in favor of the recommendation? Opposed, if any? That's carried. So the next item on the agenda is again staff report, and it has to do with the Southampton Summer Shindig Festival. And again, our Acting Director of Public Works, Len Perdue, will present.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Southampton Summer Shindig Festival Committee proposes to host the Color Dash 5-kilometer fun run, 500-foot water slide, fish fry, and dance on August 13th at various locations and times. The proceeds from the event will go towards local charities and other groups. For the event, the following road closures are requested: Clarendon Street from Victoria to Carlisle, Grenville from Clarendon to Spence, Spence Street from Grey to Anglesea, Victoria Street from Palmerston to Union Lane, and High Street, Albert to Grey, but it's actually only the intersection of High and Victoria. Insurance for the event will be confirmed prior to the final approval by staff. The Acting Director of Public Works will inform pertinent agencies of the road closures. Financial impact: this staff will be required to work on Saturday to erect and remove signage and barricades for the road closures. The cost is estimated in the range of $600. As in the past, this special events concerning non-profit groups, these funds will be provided by the municipality.
Thank you, Len. Then the recommendation is that permission be granted to the Southampton Shindig Committee to host the Color Dash 5-kilometer fun run, the 500-foot water slide, a fish fry, and dance. Further, that the following road closures be approved for time stated on August 13th, 2016. Clarendon Street, Victoria Street to Carlisle Street from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Grenville Street, Clarendon Street to Spence Street from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Spence Street, Grey Street to Anglesea Street from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Victoria Street, Palmerston Street to Union Lane from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. and High Street from Albert Street to Grey Street from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. Questions or comments? Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is a great and exciting project and worked out really well last year. My question is about the road closures, and I know that the ambulances coming from the hospital will often go down Grey Street to Clarendon or possibly use High Street. I'm just wondering what alternate routes have been suggested for ambulance travel out onto 21.
Len can address that.
Ambulances coming from the north, crossing the Saugeen River Bridge, will turn east up Clarendon, and then take Grey Street across to the hospital. Okay. Portion of Clarendon is closed, yeah. Yes, but the barricades will be manned so that in the case of an emergency, they'll move them out of the way to allow the ambulances through. Same thing, vehicles coming from the south will use Peel Street and then across Grey.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Mine also has to do with access to the hospital, and I appreciate your comment about Clarendon having a staffed opportunity there. Who's responsible for the signage for something like this? And ambulances and emergency workers can be informed, but somebody who's just trying to drive to the hospital, if they turn onto High Street, because High Street's not technically closed until you get up to the Victoria Street intersection, then it's quite a meandering way to get back out there to get around. So are we going to be putting up some interesting signage at a couple of locations that basically suggest here's the alternate route for this period of time to the hospital? And then the second part of my question is all of this, I understand, why the magnitude of the road closures are here. It's related to a run and then a particular activity on Victoria Street. I would request that special consideration be given to what's going to happen on Palmerston Street when all of this is going on. The reason being that Palmerston Street is one of the routes in and out of the fire hall, and when any kind of activity in either at the Coliseum or up at the park generates a lot of traffic, that street becomes almost impassable. And Len wouldn't necessarily remember last year at the craft show, we tried making the street one way, and it had limited success. We didn't get the signs up early enough, but that was a good way to address a difficult situation on that little stretch, that one block stretch of Palmerston, because as soon as there's parking on both sides and you're trying to have two-way traffic on that street, it's really not particularly safe. But my initial question is really like, are we responsible for additional signage that sort of suggests alternate routes to the hospital for non-emergency people?
Not sure about that, but that's something I can look into, and gladly we can put up some more signs that weekend.
Okay. Any further questions? If not, all in favor of the recommendation. Opposed, if any, that is carried. Maybe you want to get Councillor Madison. There he is. The next item on the agenda is a special event, again, a special event for farm to table dinner and dance. And our Acting Director of Public Works, Len Perdue, will present again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Port Elgin BIA is proposing to host a farm-to-table dinner and dance on August 12th from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. This will be the first time that this event has been hosted. The event is a fundraising effort with the proceeds going to the Port Elgin Farmers Market. For this event, the following road closures have been requested: Green Street from Goderich to Waterloo. As this is a BIA event, the insurance costs are to be covered under the town's policy. The Director of Public Works will inform all pertinent agencies of the road closure. Staff will be required to work on the Friday night to remove signages and barricades. This cost is estimated in the neighborhood of $400. As with past special events concerning non-profit groups, these funds will be provided by the municipality.
Thank you, Len. The recommendation is that permission be granted to the Port Elgin BIA to host the Farm to Table Dinner and Dance on Friday, August 12, 2016. Further, that the following road closures be approved from 3 p.m. to 12 a.m. Green Street, Goderich to Waterloo Street. Questions or comments? Councillor Dave Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to say a few words in support of this event. It's a wonderful idea, and it was brought up by the BIA, but it was supported by our Economic Development Advisory Committee, in particular to highlight the important role that agriculture plays in our community. When we start talking about economic development, quite often the conversation ends up around tourism and industry and commercial development, which are all very important, but we should never and must never forget that the agricultural community, both the ones that work directly and those that support it, are very important, and this is a way that we can highlight the good work that those people do in our communities. So I'm very much in support of this.
Further comments? If not, all in favor of the recommendation. Opposed, if any, that's carried. So, the next item on the agenda is a Planning and Development Staff Report, and has to do with the Ontario Municipal Board hearing and minor variance for Roberts at 243 Summerhill Road, and our Director of, Chief Building Official, Mark Toby, will present.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In February of 2016, the Committee of Adjustment approved a minor variance application, allowing a deck and associated staircases to encroach into the west side yard setback no closer than 0.76 meters into the side yard property line. The neighbor owning the abutting lands appealed the decision of the committee on the following stated grounds. A staircase and deck were constructed contrary to the zoning bylaw and permit to the property line. legal setback being 1.5 meters, and the house is located 1.74 meters from the property line, making a legal staircase and deck impossible. The reason variance was considered at all was because the town was notified that the deck had been installed contrary to the zoning bylaw. Town staff revoked the building permit from 2003, which permitted the deck to be constructed. The landowner was then required to move the deck and apply for a variance to receive relief from the zoning bylaw. The OMB is scheduled 1 day to consider the appeal set for May 17, 2016. Due to the nature of the stated grounds for appeal, it is advised that the town retain its own legal counsel to assist in the defense of the decision and to mitigate against any matters not related to specific requests for the variances. Financial impact. Pursuant to the fees and charges bylaw, the applicant is required to cover the legal expenses of the town.
Thank you. Then the recommendations is the town of Saugeen Shores retain legal counsel to defend the decision of the Committee of Adjustments on application A55-1548, 243 Summerhill Road. Questions, Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just curious, the last line, the applicant is required to cover the legal expenses of the town. We're deciding that it's important for us to have a lawyer there, but we're going to force somebody else to pay for that? Am I hearing that correctly?
Yes, you are.
Well, I'm just questioning. Have we done that before?
I can't think of it as a specific situation. However, we have had it in the fees and charges bylaw. The premise is that there's only one person that benefits from this minor variance, and that's the applicant, and that's the reason why they should pay the town's legal fees.
I too need some clarification. So we said yes with a building permit. We approved a building permit in 2003. And now due to a complaint, we're saying no?
It was deemed that the permit issued in 2003 was issued in error, and the permit was revoked due to that issue.
At what date was it revoked? 2016?
It was revoked last year.
Okay, hold on a second. I need some help here, Mr. Mayor. In 2003, we said it was okay, and so the person went ahead and built this deck and this staircase. And they did it with the proviso that normally there's a 5 foot, sorry, here I am going back into Imperial. There's a 1.5 meter setback from the property line. And they're at 0.79.
Mr. Mayor, I understand the deck is built at 0, and the information that was on the building permit application that was considered 12 years ago does not reflect what was in the field.
Okay, that's different. So what was built is not what was asked for. Is that what you're telling me?
Nor what was applied for.
Okay. I have something else, but maybe I'll let somebody else and I'll come back. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just also wanted to mention that there was a significant sentence that wasn't read. There was no inspection by the town.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted some clarification on the process. Oops, yikes. On the process going forward now for how we determine whether or not to employ our legal counsel for the defense of decisions of the Committee of Adjustment. In the past, this is the first time I think that I'm aware of, or at least that I can recall, where counsel has been called upon to decide whether or not to bring in its legal counsel to defend decisions by the Planning Advisory Committee or the Committee of Adjustment. And I'm wondering, maybe I'm wrong about that. I can't recall an occasion. I just wonder, is that now, from this point forward, how we're going to proceed? That whenever we're looking, whenever the OMB, or whenever a decision of ours is being appealed to the OMB that council will then have to decide, or is there another process that could, that has happened in the past that is still going to happen? I just would like to know what we're doing going forward now compared to what we did in the past.
The circumstances that give rise to the staff recommendation as to whether or not we retain counsel depends on the type of application, who the appellant is, and the position taken by either the Planning Advisory Committee or the Committee of Adjustment in this case. So the one that was dealt with recently was a very different set of circumstances. This is a circumstance that more clearly aligns with the committee rendering a decision that should be supported by our council. So each one has to be looked on its merits, and we certainly have retained counsel during the time that I've been here to defend previous decisions.
Yeah, I certainly don't disagree with that. We have retained counsel. It just hasn't become a decision of council to retain counsel necessarily up to this point. So what you're suggesting is staff is going to vet these on a case-by-case basis going forward and decide whether or not it merits council's intervention as to whether or not to hire. Will it always, if we're going to hire counsel, or counsel and counsel becomes very difficult, if we're going to hire legal representation, will it at that stage always be from now on council's decision as to whether or not to hire legal representation for each of these cases, or will there be instances where legal representation is hired without council's direct input?
Frankly, Mr. Mayor, I can't recall us not advising council of appeals in past circumstances, but perhaps there's something escaping me. And in this particular case, just coming back, if I could, Mr. Mayor, to the question about the applicant paying the town's legal fees, one of the choices the applicant has is to retain their own counsel. And then why would we have two lawyers there? So if council supports this in principle, we'll certainly have a dialogue with the property owner who's being appealed in the next few days to sort out a course of action.
Councillor Madison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For any building permit, is there a statute of limitations as to how long somebody can appeal what's been done?
The building code has a couple benchmarks, and the main benchmark that you're talking about is approximately 15 years. So we're within that time frame, and so we had to address the issue.
Follow up, please, Mr. Mayor. So because we missed the building inspection, does that not make us more liable for it than the occupant?
The owner of the property was sent a letter after the permit was issued, after the deck was constructed, requesting an inspection, and never followed up on that letter. So we've given that to our council, and they're made aware.
So it appears the deck was built originally without a permit.
No, the deck was originally built with a permit.
It just didn't meet the requirements of the zoning bylaw.
That's correct.
Okay. Vice Deputy Huber, we'll get on with this.
Thank you. It's not completely clear in the report. And hopefully Bart and or Larry will correct me if I'm wrong. What you're looking at is the deck that was there. The decision of the Planning Committee, the Committee of Adjustment, would require that the existing deck be removed, and then this was a decision that would enable them to rebuild a deck, but the setback would be further back than the deck that is, I believe, still there.
That's correct.
So that's not completely clear there. The other part about this application is there is an indication that the house is fairly close to the property line that abuts the neighbor who has appealed the decision. There is a doorway out on that side of the house, so there would be the potential for some kind of decking there to enable an opportunity for the in and out from that door. So this decision, when you just read it, there's an existing deck that the decision would mean that deck had to be removed and then something rebuilt that came back closer to the house, but was still not as far back as it needed to be. And I don't know if the planning minutes have caught up with our schedule, so that might be obvious to some people, but if not, that's part of this decision too. I just, I understand the fees and charges thing. Again, I was just surprised when I saw that, we would be defending Committee of Adjustments decision, but the applicant, who was not the applicant for the variance. So the applicant for the appeal is the neighbor.
It's referring to the applicant of the planning application. The homeowner of the deck owner has to pay the town's legal fees.
Okay, all right. Thank you. That's clear to me now.
Councillor Rich.
So, through you, Mr. Mayor, how much would a legal counsel like this normally cost for an OMB hearing?
I think, about $5,000, somewhere in that range.
So we're talking about $5,000 because of two feet, right? Is it my distance? We're talking about 2 feet a deck?
Yep, right? Along the side of a house.
Councillor Minaj.
I'm just not up on my comprehensive zoning bylaw the way I wished I was. Can I have it restated that decks and staircases are not considered permanent structures, so they can get closer to the property line than, say, a permanently installed building?
The decks and are very much in the building code and are very much in the zoning bylaw. So they are structures, and they have to follow the requirements of the zoning bylaw and the building code.
Oh, no, they have to meet the requirements of the zoning. Well, what's happened here is the Committee of Adjustment has approved a narrower setback. And this decision is now being appealed. So the question really here is not whether this is the right thing or not, because that decision has been made and it will be adjudicated on the Ontario Municipal Board. There's nothing we can do here tonight to change that. What we're talking about is how the legal fees for the applicant for the minor variance are going to be covered. Okay? Any further questions? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. The next item on the agenda is a staff report, and it has to do with the assumption of works for 3M-205 Pegasus Trail subdivision, and our Manager of Development Services and Chief Billing Official, Bart Toby, will present.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Miramichi Shores Ltd. entered into a subdivision agreement with the town to develop lands shown on the attached drawings. The agreement authorized the developer to construct and install the works required for a subdivision.
Back one page.
Oh, I must have flipped early, sorry. Back to the start. Susan Kathleen Pride entered into a subdivision agreement with the town to develop the land shown on the attached drawings. The agreement authorized the developer to construct and install the works required for a subdivision of 17 single detached dwellings lots. While allowing the developer to construct the subdivision, the agreement also required the developer to maintain all constructed works and ensure that all lots were developed in accordance with the town requirements. As per the terms of the agreement, the developer has provided the appropriate documentation to demonstrate that all subdivision works have been constructed and maintained and repaired in accordance with the agreement. Staff has reviewed the submission and recommended that the subdivision works may be assumed. Sorry about that.
That's okay. The recommendation is that the council considers a bylaw to assume all works within the plan of subdivision 3M-205 for Pegasus Trail subdivision. Questions or comments? Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to express appreciation to staff on this particular file. I know that there's been a lot of back and forth, a lot of work bringing this one to fruition in terms of ensuring that the municipality's interests were protected, and also helping the applicant get to this point in as timely a manner as could possibly be done. So I just wanted to express appreciation and thanks to staff for your hard work on this file. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any
further comments? If not, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. So the next item on the agenda then is assumption of works for Plan 3M-209 Miramichi Shores Phase 3. And again, our Manager of Development Services and Chief Building Official, Bart Toby, will present.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Miramichi Shores Ltd. entered into a subdivision agreement with the town to develop the land shown on the attached drawings. The agreement authorizes the developer to construct and install works required for a subdivision of 14 single detached dwelling lots. While allowing the developer to construct the subdivision, the agreement also requires the developer to maintain all constructed works and ensure all lots were developed in accordance with the town requirements. As per the terms of the agreement, the developer has provided appropriate documentation to demonstrate that all the subdivision works have been constructed, maintained, and repaired in accordance with the agreement. Staff has reviewed the submission and recommended that the subdivision works may be assumed.
Thank you, Bart. Then the recommendation is that council consider a bylaw to assume all works within plan of subdivision 3M-209 for the Miramichi Shores subdivision phase 3. Questions or comments? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. So the next item on the agenda is a Community Services, Parks and Recreation staff report, and it has to do with the Chesley Street Docking Committee lease agreement. And our Director of Community Services, Jane Jagielewski, will present the report.
Thank you. Tonight I'm providing you with the Chesley Street Docking agreement. It expires at the end of April. This dates back from pre-amalgamation, and the Chesley Street Docking Committee provides a seasonal dock facility on the north side of the Saugeen River. It's a volunteer committee. They've done a great job with assigning the fees and spaces along the Southampton River. The members of the committee, they have reviewed this agreement and are satisfied with the contents. The financial impact for 2016 is $3,280.
Thank you, Jane. The recommendation is that the agreement between the Town of Saugeen Shores and the Chesley Street Docking Committee be renewed for a period of 5 years, commencing May the 1st, 2016, and expiring on April the 30th, 2021. Questions or comments? None. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. The next item on the agenda then is, again, it's a staff report, and it has to do with the Southampton Yacht Club 5-year lease agreement. And again, our Director of Community Services, Jane Jagielewski, will present the report.
The Southampton Yacht Club operates the seasonal docking facilities on the south side of the Saugeen River, and they've been doing that for a number of years. It's a volunteer group, and they assign a docking space as well for seasonal boaters. All docks are owned and maintained by the Yacht Club themselves. The club also continues to manage the wall space, and that's a space that they can allow for transient docks, and it's more of a courtesy dock for people coming into Southampton. The club also has agreed to continue to place a safe buoy over the known hazard in the river, and with the high water levels, hopefully we don't have to deal with that so much this year. I've met with the members of the club, and they are in agreement with this agreement, and the financial impact for 2016 is $2,357.50.
Thank you, Jane. So the recommendation is that the agreement between the Town of Saugeen Shores and the Southampton Yacht Club be renewed for a period of 5 years, commencing May the 1st, 2016, and expiring on April the 30th, 2021. Any questions or comments? I'll start with Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Just out of interest, I noticed in the contract that the Yacht Club is responsible for maintaining the gin pole. Is that the thing in the river that's over the old abutment for the bridge?
No, that's the piece of apparatus that they use to install their sail boat. It's their mast. It's the large, tall, yeah. There's one at the Port Elgin Harbor as well.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jane, I just wondered why the increase for this agreement per annual increase is about $150, whereas the Chesley Street one is $100 a year.
Similar to the Snowmobile Club, we went by historic usages and maintained that the same.
Any further questions? If not, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. So the next item on the agenda is the staff report, and it has to do with the Harbour Light Restaurant lease agreement. And again, our Director of Community Service, Jane Jagielewski, will present the report.
Thank you. I'm delighted to bring forward the Harbour Light Restaurant agreement with Tom and Joan Johnson. It mimics the similar agreement that we have with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, in which it ends at December 31st, 2021. As you are aware, we've had some discussions with Mr. and Mrs. Johnson in regards to a patron washroom facility within their establishment, and they've agreed that they will have one installed by the end of 2016. Once that is completed, then the agreement will be automatically renewed until the end of December 2021. Staff will continue to assist Mr. and Mrs. Johnson to ensure compliance with the Ontario Building Code for the construction phase, and we have met with them on site and will continue to do so. We have an open communication and a great working relationship with them, and we look forward to assisting them through this transition. The rent for 2016 shall be $4,670.61.
Thank you, Jane. Then the recommendation is that Council pass a bylaw to authorize the agreement between the Town of Saugeen Shores and Tom and Joan Johnson commencing May the 1st, 2016 and expire on December the 31st, 2021. Comments? Councillor Dave Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've read this agreement, and those that are involved with it will know that I've taken some personal interest in this agreement through its development over the past year or so, and I've gone so far as to speak to the person who was the mayor of the town of Port Elgin at the time that the new washroom facility and the office for the harbor were built, as well as the CAO at that time. And it occurs to me that it's not universally well known what's taking place here, and I feel that the agreement that was made at that time, some 18 or 20 years ago, is being reneged on. And I hope that we never find ourselves as a council in a position where we make an agreement that is subsequently changed. And I'll go into just a little bit of detail of what that is. The Harbour Lake Restaurant was originally built some decades and decades ago with men's and women's washrooms associated with it. And when the town, 20 years ago, the town of Port Elgin, the former town of Port Elgin, decided to build the restaurant, or the harbour office and the washroom facility, they needed to encroach upon where those washrooms are. So they made an agreement with Mr. and Mrs. Johnson that they would close their personally owned washroom facilities, but that's okay because they could use the town's new washroom facility, which was just around the corner. And that's the way it's been for the better part of 2 decades. And now the town is saying you can no longer use the subsequently installed public washroom for your restaurant. You have to build your own washroom. So they're going to be under the gun for a renovation to the tune of $20,000 or $30,000 or more, $40,000 perhaps, to build an accessible washroom where they had washrooms before that were closed because of the town's requirements for the space. And I've confirmed this, and both the CAO and the mayor at the time were quite taken aback that this was taking place. And I'm quite taken aback, and I don't think that we're operating in the spirit of the agreement that was made. Unfortunately, there is no affirmative documentation that exists or can be produced from back in that day that explains the way that this condition was done, but that was what I've been led to believe, and I've confirmed it through several different sources, that that's the way it was, that this was an agreement. You don't need washrooms anymore because the washrooms are going to be built and they're going to be town washrooms, and then for reasons which have never been fully explained to me, that washroom is now no longer going to be available to the restaurant patrons, who are essentially the public. So we're closing the public washroom. We're having the owners of the facility install a private washroom, which I'm afraid will de facto become the public washroom, because if people who are at the restaurant or in the vicinity of the harbor who cannot use the public washroom are going to have to go over to Green Street or over to North Shore Park to use one of the other public washrooms, or have the Johnsons open their private washroom to the public, which the public are the customers. They're one and the same people, right? So here we are reneging on an agreement and forcing them to put up a washroom which will become a de facto public washroom. And I don't think it's a carriage of justice. I don't think it's a carriage of integrity of this town, and I'm very much against it, although I do understand that a great deal of work has been put into this agreement with the Director of Public Works and with the intervention of the mayor even, and with the Johnsons, and this is the agreement they've come to. I just don't think it's, I don't feel proud of it as a councillor that we would go and force people to do this. So that's the way I feel about it, and I'm going to have a hard time supporting this agreement.
Through Mr. Mayor, just a point of clarification, that the obligation to construct the washroom was actually contained in the previous 5-year lease agreement, which was defaulted on by the tenants. And I would think that over the course of 20 or 30 years, the circumstances that reflect what is occurring down there can change over time. And there were a series of commitments made by the proposed tenant a number of years ago that we're trying to see fulfilled.
I don't think we're closing those public washrooms, are we? No, those public washrooms will remain open. So we're not closing those ones. So just, okay. Councillor Mike Myatt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just wanted to reiterate what you just said. I've been sitting on the Waterfront Committee now for the last year and a half, and and Councillor Minaj can correct me, but we've had no discussions about Councillor Matt about closing those washrooms at a Waterfront Committee level. So I don't know where that's coming from either about closing those washrooms to the public. And no, that's okay. So that's new to me, because we have not discussed closing the waterfront or closing the washrooms at the Waterfront Committee level. That agreement that can't be found from 20 years ago, I guess it can't be found. I don't know how it read, but hard to react to that, make a decision based on that 20 years ago. But I just want to make a comment about the fact that in my view, there was no plans to close the washrooms.
And I don't think there is either.
Well, whether or not the sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm finished for now.
All right. Whether or not the current public washroom, which is the Harbor washroom, remains open or closed. The fact is that the reason that the restaurant washrooms were closed, were taken out of service, because the rough-ins are still there, was because the town requested an encroachment to build the office. And they said to them, we're going to take your washrooms out of service, but that's okay, because having the public washrooms over there is going to fulfill your requirement under the public health agreement for washrooms associated with a restaurant facility. Then if it's not for not for the reasons of closing the public washroom, what has changed that has now made it any different that the public washroom around the corner is no longer adequate for the operation of the restaurant when it has been for the past 20 years? I just don't understand what has changed. I don't believe that the public health department has mandated that they build a washroom. I've never heard that.
Yeah, if I may, certainly it falls into the bigger spectrum of what we're looking at with the harbor. The long-term capital forecast identifies the need to build an additional or a new harbor master office and washroom facility. One of the downfalls, and we certainly talked about this during our capital budget and budget deliberations, was the issue with the harbor. Our harbor has little to no amenities that we can promote to boaters coming into the area that are familiar certainly with boaters only washroom. So certainly our vision is to have eventually a boaters only washroom. Our first step is to get a washroom facility for the restaurant facilities themselves. And that's even, from a customer service perspective, obviously that's ideal in any eating establishment that's in close proximity. We have no intentions of closing those existing washrooms down to the general public until we are in a position that we have a boaters only washroom facility. At such time we'll rearrange so that there's a public washroom in that facility too. We certainly don't want to take away a service, and what I mean by that is we don't want to take away a public washroom facility down there, because we know what that can be like when you take away from a service. If anything, we're looking at enhancing the service. And again, this is in reaction to our dwindling numbers at the harbor and how can we better serve our boaters. We're cognizant of our boaters in the area, our visitors in the area, and obviously our tenant in the area.
Councilor Minaj had a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Notwithstanding all of the good work that the committees have done, I mean, there should always be an opportunity, in my mind, for 11th hour revelations, and certainly Councillor Myatt has brought one forward. I would like to think that that if in fact the previous municipality and the CAO of that municipality and the mayor of that municipality could be invited into Larry's office and give the same information, that maybe we should look at it in a different light. And I would hope that once again we're more compassionate than officious. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I would really like us to look at this in the broader context of what we're doing down at the waterfront. I mean, here we have an agreement which is really a 5-year-old agreement in terms of putting a washroom in place in this location, and the town of Saugeen Shores has now got $1.3 million or something on the books to invest in its own washroom facility not far from there, and also to invest in improving that entire area. We've got the Director of Community Services working on a plan to revitalize the harbor in that area. What we're talking about doing, the town is talking about making major investments in this exact vicinity of this restaurant in order to drive people down there and get them in the door of that restaurant. I mean, that's a big chunk of what we want, is to get people in the door of that restaurant and every other business in this town by making those investments. But particularly in businesses in that immediate area, it should benefit a great deal. We're going to make big investments down there. We're going to make big changes down there that are going to be to everybody's benefit. And I think that there's some shifting happening here. We're going to get an investment should this agreement carry on, and we get what was agreed to before is finally done in this location. The Harbor Light's going to make a small investment. We're also coming up to the table and making big investments, and I think that there some give and take there, and every good agreement, every good deal has got some give and take and some investment by all parties and on all sides. So I can support the agreement on that basis. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Rich.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So when I see 5-year leases, it makes me think that you're trying to create a longer-term lease so that the person that owns there feels some stability and feels like investing in the property or investing in the area. So I'm not certain that I would go for a 5-year lease until I saw exactly what the Waterfront Committee wanted to. What the vision is going to be for down along that area. We're talking about doing some investment over to the one side, investment on the other side. Does the current state of the Harbor Light Restaurant fit in with the vision of the Waterfront Committee and of this community in the future? How does that work?
Okay, Councillor Mayan.
Thanks. I hope this is my last.
I think it'll be your last one. I think you've had 3. That should be enough. We got to move on.
Yeah, just to answer that last question briefly, the reason that the 5-year agreement is being put in place, and it was stated by the Director of Public Works, is to align with the lease agreement that the town has with the Ministry of Federal Fisheries Department. Because there used to be a time when Mr. and Mrs. Johnson would lease that property directly from the Federal Ministry of Fisheries until the town took over the lease of the entire facility, and then they sublet it out to them. But I still see this as being an unfair burden on the leasees. They have a business, and it's not like a restaurant business in town. They only have 3, maybe 3.5 months of viable business to run down there. We're imposing upon them the burden of putting in a substantial investment. With the 5 years makes it possible for them to even envision making such an investment. But then they're going to be in a conflict situation where they've got a private washroom, which is going to be likely intended for customers only, and then they're going to be put into a sticky situation where they're going to have to make judgments on people and say, well, you're a customer, so you get to use the washroom, but you haven't bought anything yet, so you don't get to use the washroom, but you do. And it's going to create an animosity in a business down there that doesn't need to be. It's a friendly restaurant. People like to go there. Some people buy things today, but not tomorrow. And I stand by the idea that the public and the customers and the boaters, for that matter, are one and the same people. They're all there for the same reason, whether you're spending money today or tomorrow or not, or whether you have a boat in the harbor. It's all the same, and the town is going to be investing substantial amounts of money, and this is a substantial amount of money for the Johnsons, and I just don't think we're living up to the spirit of the agreement, and for that reason, I am not going to be supporting this.
So, I think we've had pretty good discussion on this particular item. You're correct. I have worked, and I really appreciate the patience that Tom and Joan have had. I've worked closely with this, trying to get to this agreement. And I guess I'll call the question then. All in favor of the recommendation? 1, 2, 3, 4. Opposed? Okay. Well, you don't have a lease agreement. Pardon? That fails. The next item, we have a number of communications for Committee of the Whole petitions for information. There's 16 items there. Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had a comment on a couple of them. First is item 1, the letter from the Ministry of the Environment with regard to the Unifor wind turbine. I wanted to just point out for Council's information, I'm sure you all noted anyway, that the Ministry identifies an acoustic audit taking place this September. I think it's important to be clear that the Ministry, when we met with them earlier, very early this year, I think it was in January this year, indicated that voluntary test was to take place in June, in the spring of the year. And so now it seems to have been pushed back toward the fall. This is just a continuing slide in the timelines on this, pushed out. Of course, these tests can't be done when the weather gets too cold. So, if it doesn't take place in September, the Ministry may take additional steps, but that's additional steps in 2017. So, it's just delays and delays and delays. And meanwhile, meanwhile, the question hangs out there as to whether the machine is operating in compliance or not. And the Ministry seems content with that, and I am not, obviously. The other item I wanted to just touch on very briefly was the communication from the South Bruce Community and Business Association with regard to the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority. I think that association raises some concerns that obviously are shared by a number of people in the community about the need for the authority to do better work at supporting not just business, but anybody who's attempting to do things in the watershed in a way that, to give them the approvals that are necessary to protect the watershed, while at the same time allowing things to move on expeditiously. I would say, just briefly with regard to Gay Foods, I think it's an important thing to mention very briefly at Saugeen Shores Council because it's a fairly major regional facility. The Conservation Authority, in my view, has reached I've been meeting with Gailey officials and with officials from South Bruce as well as authority officials for the last number of weeks on this subject, and I can say that I think we have a great solution to this issue that's going to be introduced at South Bruce Council tomorrow night by SVCA staff, and it comes down to this: finding new ways to permit things like this to proceed. The Gailey plant in Teeswater has been in the water course down there in the valley in Teeswater for many, many years, and we need to find ways to allow facilities that have been there forever to grow and expand in the way they need to while protecting everybody from flooding, and there are ways to do that in the regulation. And I think it speaks broadly to the ability of regulatory agencies like SVCA, like municipal governments, to re-examine their regulations, how they regulate things, and to find new ways to make them more flexible and more adaptable, so that we can allow the private sector to operate the way it needs to, while also making sure that all the things we're responsible for protecting can be protected. And we're going to hear more about that in the next couple of days once that's announced at South Bruce. But I just wanted to say that there is positive progress on that subject now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Madison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to quickly just discuss number 4, Ministry of Tourist, Culture and Sport. Looks like we were once again turned down for another grant from the government. it makes me wonder, what are we doing wrong? Is there something that we're doing wrong, or what can we do to try and get a grant from the government? Raise their taxes. Are there communities around that are actually getting the grants that we can talk to them, or is it we have to, as it says in here, we can discuss to improve your application for next year? What is there a solution? Is there a question?
Well, I think the first approach, if we, would be to approve or approach the people that approve these grants. So we'll have an approving committee or call the ministry and say we would like to know what we're doing wrong. I suspect I've done that a number of times, but I think it's worthwhile to hear what they'll have say. And if you want, we could probably arrange a call for 2 or 3 councillors to sit in, and they'll explain to you why they picked one over the other. And so we can do that for sure.
I'd appreciate that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Sure. So we'll maybe try something like that for the next couple. Sure. Sorry, Vice Deputy Huber.
Just to go along with that, the letter that's here relates to a grant application that I think the town's involvement was quite small in it, because it was related to the Marine Heritage Festival, and the Chamber was involved too. So, it would be good to just take a look at the application too, because I know that one of the things that the Marine Heritage Festival was struggling with was they didn't have the tracking numbers that they needed to improve their chances. So it'd be good to take a look at maybe what was kind of missing, so that we can work towards having data to support applications too.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is about the minutes from the March 15th Waterfront Committee, and specifically the Water Safety Issues Report. Jane, could you describe what a life-saving station would consist of?
We have them now on some of our waterfronts, and we're looking at expanding that program. So that typically is a buoy, depending on where it is a reaching pole, and a 911 sign as well. So we're looking at expanding that further to the south.
Okay, and so we have some of those in the Southampton Beach, Jerry's Fries area.
Yeah, we installed those ones last year.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Any further? Councillor Dave Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I just wanted to make a comment about, there's a couple of pieces of correspondence here. One is from the Eastern Ontario Warden Association, and the other is a resolution that was passed by North Stormont Corporation, Township of North Stormont. And both of them are in regards to the Ontario Energy Board deliberation that's taking place and will be reviewed in May of this year regarding the expansion of natural gas into facilities that are not, into municipalities that are not currently serviced. And believe you me, I think that having natural gas in a municipality is a great driver of the economy and a great benefit to the residents who live there. And I wish well to any municipality that doesn't have it to pursue that and to get it. But the question before the Ontario Energy Board is whether or not the utilities who currently have natural gas should be required to subsidize the expansion of natural gas into areas that do not have it. And obviously in this case our municipality is one that is serviced. Unfortunately myself, I am not serviced by natural gas, so I'm not a customer, so I wouldn't be doing any subsidizing. But I just have a hard time with the concept that those that have it should be burdened with a portion of the costs to expand it to those that don't have it. And like I said before, I'm fully appreciative of those municipalities that don't have it, that want to get it, and to go forth and make agreements, as we've seen done most recently in our neighboring municipalities of Arrowhead, Ellerslie, and Kincardine, and one other, Huron, I guess, North Huron, to sign agreements with companies to expand the natural gas, but to burden the natural gas consumers of Saugeen Shores with a levy or a subsidization that would be used to expand it to other municipalities that don't have it. I just have a hard time with that concept, and for that reason it is my intention to seek support from this council to pass a resolution that would state our opposition to such a concept, and I'll be bringing that to a very near future council. Thank you.
Anything further? A motion to adjourn then. Councillor Madison, Councillor Mayette, Dave Mayette, all in favor? I'll take a 10-minute break.